MEDness, the podcast. Episode 6. The Advocates.
Kirk, we're back.
Episode 6.
You've been waiting to say that all day, haven't you?
I have been. Well, because we launched episode 5 today and we're recording episode 6. Man, this is like fast-paced industry.
It's great. We've got a couple really interesting guests. She Can is a Facebook group. Community, thank you. They're a closed community, but they'll, let people in if they're serious and willing to be respectful of the community rules. And they've got lots of interesting and good information on their site, and a really supportive group of mostly women who just, they've used medical cannabis and want to support each other in their choices.
We just finished the interview and it's hot off the topic, but what I found interesting about they're an advocacy group, and she talks about being a data nerd, which gets to a segue to our next guest. But she also talks about how, as a group, they're educating their members to educate their family doctors.
Yeah,
on the use of cannabis.
And this is going to be an ongoing thing, because I literally had a patient last week and this morning who, they had no problem going to their family doctor, getting a prescription, getting their cannabis oil from a licensed producer. But then his big question is, now what?
Now what? Yeah.
And that's a great question of now what, because there's, unlike a diabetes pill, we don't have clinical practice guidelines on exactly now what. And what's happening in this industry from our learning that, this podcast has offered us this learning, is that the clients, the patients, are learning now what. I mean, when I was down in Arizona, and episodes to come, I had a chance to interview a naturopathic doctor in Arizona, and she does the same thing. She provides a script for people to buy cannabis from a licensed producer, but she doesn't necessarily give them the prescription. It's up to them to decide how it works for them. What makes episode 6 of Reefer MEDness, the podcast, is that we are talking to two agencies, one an advocacy group and one is an app. A technology company.
A technology company that is helping patients govern their use of cannabis.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I love technology, and, everybody out there has a Fitbit and a diet tracker and tracks their sleep. So, it's one of these, after you heard about it, go, of course there should be an app for people to track the medicinal cannabis they're using. And there is. And
there is. And what makes episode 6 so special, and why I'm sitting here with this grin from ear to ear, is that these two agencies called us.
Yeah, apparently there's some listeners out there.
There's people listening to us, Trevor. But they called us after, I think, the first or second episode. And it's like, my God, we got all these episodes in the can. We don't even have time to produce these episodes, and you're calling us. So 3-4 months down the road, we finally called them.
Yeah, and they're great. They're fascinating. You're going to love what's coming up.
So welcome to episode 6 of
Reefer MEDness, the podcast.
The podcast.
I'm Trevor, the pharmacist.
And I'm Kirk, the nurse. Hey, you know what, Trevor? We also have a new sponsor. What's this sound?
I don't know. I'd love to say beer, but I don't think it is.
It's not beer. It's a specialty can of ginger beer.
Oh, I like ginger beer.
I have found myself a stash of ginger beer in Dauphin that's also an internet-based company. So we're going to talk about our new sponsor as well.
Looking forward to it, and you'll share some of that ginger beer, right?
Yeah, right away here. Wait, pass the glass. That's the water glasses.
Your problem.
Reefer MEDness, the podcast.
Today on the line, we have a very special guest from She Can. We've got Ashley Brown. Hi, Ashley. Could you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Trevor. Yes, absolutely I can. My name is Ashley Brown, as you've already mentioned, and I am a lifelong Winnipegger. I have 2 children and 3 stepchildren, and I also suffer from a seizure disorder.
So I think that leads into the next thing of, tell us a little bit about She Can and how that got started.
So I think the best way to talk about She Can is to just give you a little bit of background on my illness. The two kind of dovetail really nicely, and I believe that with an absence of evidence in the medical cannabis world, our stories are usually the most powerful thing we have. So about 9 years ago, when my youngest daughter was 3 months old, I suffered a massive seizure just out of the blue. They still really don't understand what happened. It may have been hormonal. It may have been a structural abnormality in my brain. But my life really changed overnight. So I started to have about 150 to 180 seizures a month.
Wow.
And at my worst point, I had the neurocognitive functioning of a 70-year-old with senile dementia.
So you're really having like multiple seizures a day.
Multiple seizures a day. And I'll add the caveat that they weren't all tonic-clonic like you see in the movies and the way that we frame seizures. So it took a little bit of time to understand what was happening even for myself and to be able to articulate that a lot of what was happening was very much like when your computer freezes, you shut down and have to reboot. If you have to do that 15 or 20 times a day, it's exhausting and you're always kind of in recovery mode. So that made being a mom and being a partner and being an employee a really difficult thing, and most of those roles dissolved. I lost my house and my job and a lot of things along the way. So it was really
wow. You're the definition of really screwing up someone's quality of life.
Yes, my quality of life was not what it should have been at 27. That's for sure. But I had great doctors. Like, they really did do everything they could, and at a point, we just got to a place in 2016 where my specialists reached kind of a dead end. They had done everything they could. The surgery became too risky. They found some evidence of brain damage, but it was just a very dicey thing to do, and they just said, we can't guarantee you quality of life. We don't want to risk anything being damaged further. So at that point, I kind of fell into a bit of a deep depression. It was about managing the other things in my life, my migraines, my, now clinical depression. And, I think we as a family, my partner, my children, we needed time to kind of collect ourselves around that. And luckily, I have great support. So the way that I segued into medical cannabis was really through the help and support of other people. I had a very good friend who had Lyme disease. And one day when she was well enough, and so was I, we got together for dinner, and she tossed me a syringe of cannabis-derived CBD oil.
And what did you think when your friend was handing you, medical pot, but my friend's handing me pot?
Well, that's just it. I mean, I had used recreational marijuana, and it really had never done anything. So I kind of looked at her and said, yeah, it didn't help my seizures. I'm not, really interested. And she just said, forget everything you think you know about marijuana. This is medical cannabis. So that was kind of a moment of, I took a leap of faith with her because I trusted her, and I was willing to suspend my disbelief. So we were actually going to the cottage for the first time with my daughters, and those things were really hard for me. Heat is still somewhat of a trigger, and I often couldn't be outside with my children. So I decided to try the CBD oil, and I took it every day for 3 days when we were there, and it was the first time I had gone for 24 hours without having a seizure.
Well, that's amazing. That's a huge change.
It was really surreal, and I was able to be at the beach because I wasn't constantly rebooting from a seizure, and my partner and I cried because it just seemed like something that was really the impossible had become possible. There was at least hope there.
So I assume that, things are still going relatively well with you?
Yeah, they are. So once I kind of started to learn the ropes of medical cannabis, and that's obviously where SheCan comes in, my seizures decreased, and so did my anticonvulsant medication. So instead of having 150 to 180 seizures a month, I average about 12 to 15. And, that's not perfect. It's not a cure, but it has been a massive, massive increase to my quality of life, and has really given me an opportunity to help others now too. So the biggest thing, of course, and I know that you and Kirk have addressed this, is that there really isn't a lot of information about what to do once you get a prescription. So having obtained one, I kind of was at a loss as to what do I take, when do I take it, where do I get it, and it all seems really bewildering. So I turned to the place that we all go when we have a question, which is the internet, for better or worse. And I found a lot of great resources in other patients, but it was also kind of negative and toxic and hard to sort out what was legal and what wasn't, to be honest.
So I've got two things, and actually this is going to lead really well into, frankly, a gentleman I was talking to this morning. But if you don't mind sharing, now this is private health information, so you don't have to. Do you mind telling us what other meds you're on for your seizures now that are sort of going with or without the cannabis, like that are working well, we assume, with the cannabis you're taking?
So I don't mind speaking to that at all, because I think it's a really important question that comes up a lot, especially as we see more people transitioning to medical cannabis. Currently, I'm still on 2 seizure meds. That's clobazam and also lamotrigine.
Okay.
So my doses halved on the clobazam, and it's about a third to a quarter on the lamotrigine.
Oh, so yeah, those are like you said, standard seizure medications that I see in the pharmacy every day.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of discussion about clobazam, especially, and actually some of the interactions. So, we're excited as a patient community to have more, involvement in talking about what those things look like and how they can be responsibly managed.
So, and I think this will lead well into my next question, but just so happens I had a gentleman last week, and then it happens to be again this morning, who's, we'll call it, experimenting with medicinal cannabis. He's a cancer patient, and he didn't have trouble getting his doctor to write the prescription and then get an oil in his hands. His big concern was now what? Because his doctor didn't have a clue on the dosing. He just doesn't know where to turn for, how should I use this? What type should I use? He had so many questions. I thought, I bet you somewhere like SheCan might be because like everybody else, he's going to go do some research on the internet. What would she, if you had a patient like that sort of join SheCan, where would they get pointed? What would happen with them in the community?
So that is pretty much the reason we exist. I think we're sitting at almost 1,650 members. SheCan was started by myself and a handful of other women just over a year ago. And that is the most common question, is people say, okay, yes, I've gotten to this point where my doctor's prescribed. Now what? And it always comes back down to sharing the experiences that people are having. So there isn't a lot of anecdotal evidence. You can't say take 2 milliliters of oil at 10 a.m. and then 6 to 8 hours later take another 2. Everybody's going to be unique. The plant itself is so complex. It becomes more about understanding what other people have tried and what has worked and hasn't worked and where to start. So we're still in a place where there's a lot of trial and error. But if someone is coming to us, especially someone who is a cancer patient, we're going to do our best to make sure that their questions get answered. And there are no stupid questions in SheCan. That's the most important part. A lot of people haven't used medical cannabis or even cannabis at all. So these products, they can get some recommendations from their licensed producer, but their licensed producers are pretty sanctioned by Health Canada, and they can't make a lot of medical claims about what medical cannabis can and cannot do for people. So that's where a group like SheCan, we can speak freely because we're patients first. And I think a lot of times the first thing we do is ask people what they're taking or what they're treating, and then go from there in kind of collaborating and being very vocal and engaged as a group. The biggest thing is that the process can be discouraging if things don't work right away. And that's where we want to maintain that confidence that they can connect with us, again and again, and really check in through that process in, maybe try something different or try it at a different time of day, or maybe it's a matter of trying it on an empty stomach or with a small snack or, microdosing. those are all options that, when you're starting out and you don't have any tools, other patients sharing their experiences of trying those things can really empower you to feel like you can have some success with medical cannabis.
No, that's great. And one of the things I really liked when I was flipping through the forums was there seems to be a lot of stress, and I think it might have even been in the terms and conditions that we want to, there's not a huge amount of science on how cannabis should be used at all, but you guys seem to be leaning towards, let's have a look at what science there is and try to, keep the wild claims to a minimum.
Yeah, so we have kind of two premises that we always operate from. And number one, and the team that leads the group on a day-to-day basis, especially, my lead administrator, Jamie, they really look at it as cannabis is not a magic bullet and it's not a panacea. So we don't want anyone to feel badly should they not find massive success in a cure from cannabis. And we also don't want to shame anybody for using pharmaceutical drugs. So that's always kind of the first piece. And the second piece is, as you said, it's all about education. There isn't a lot of firm science, but there are some studies emerging, and there is science around the plant itself. So what we found, and it's really amazing to watch, is people who didn't even know what CBD stood for, coming around and learning about elements of the plant like terpenes and dosing and milligrams and all sorts of other cannabinoids and profiles beyond just indica and sativa or THC and CBD percentages. So the more information we can kind of give that is scientific, and then the more emerging research we can encourage, I think that causes people to really feel like they have some say in the way they're using this medication. So we're very big on education first, and also on safe and legal access, because that's a really confusing thing, and it's very hard, to help yourself if you don't know what it is you're taking, right? Like, I got some good stuff. It really helps with my pain. Okay, well, what about it was good? How can we replicate that? So sticking to the system we have, although it's not a perfect system, we look to collaborate and work with government and the industry to make those things better based on our personal experience and on the education that's emerging.
No, those are great points. And as a pharmacist, and we're used to having things in the pharmacy that have been Health Canada approved and tested. So yeah, I love that you guys promote the licensed producers. I know there, we'll call it the more libertarian cannabis users out there who'd just as soon not go through a licensed producer, but I think you at least get some amount of reassurance that there's been some testing done and what's on the outside of the label is really what's inside the product. So yeah, no, I completely agree. Sort of going back to my patient, and I'm sure this comes up over and over again, when someone, is just starting out and has picked a strain and picked an amount, what sort of guidance does the community give towards them? How do I tell if this is working? Like, some people I assume would be straightforward. In your case, I have less seizures. But, the guy I was talking to this morning, he's nauseous and a lot of pain. So how do we tell if he's got the right amount and it's doing the right thing for him? What sort of guidance do you guys do on that?
So I get really excited talking about this part because it's kind of twofold, and I'll just admit that I'm a pretty big data nerd. So you may have noticed that there is a lot of charts and polls within the group, because I find that when we have numbers, it really helps people to get a benchmark for how things are working. So some of what we'll do is poll the group, and then we'll be able to kind of refer back, and we try and manage expectation. I mean, people have their own barometer of how well something is working. And if we can kind of encourage them to be self-monitoring, that's even more helpful, because then they can kind of stack their own experience up against, a poll that says that most people find CBD, for instance, works really well for inflammation, but doesn't always handle acute pain. So it's kind of a combination of data and your personal experience. But the second part that I get really excited talking about is actually something that was created by a friend of mine and somebody I met through this medical cannabis journey who's also a patient herself, and that's an app called Strainprint. So we have a lot of patients who use Strainprint. It's a medical cannabis journal that allows you to track your use in all the licensed producer strains, and user strains are available in there. So you can download it for free, and then you just enter your session. So you start using it, and you pick, your method of ingestion. So let's say a vaporizer. I took 3 puffs of this strain X. I was feeling nausea at a 9 out of 10. And then 20 minutes later, or at a set increment of time later, it'll prompt you to say how you're feeling now. So it'll allow you to rate again on that scale of 1 to 10. And you'll be able to kind of follow that, because sometimes we want to believe things are really working, and sometimes they're not working as well as we thought they were. But in that moment, if we're able to be objective, we see a pattern emerge with that data. So that's been a really huge tool for so many of our members, because it's also accountability in terms of what you're using. There were strains I thought were working really well, and looking at them, being able to export that data and even, share it with my doctor, I can see that there were better options for me, or maybe I needed less or more frequently or less frequently. So it's been really powerful, and we're able to kind of compare notes within the group with that information as well. So it dovetails really nicely.
No, that's really great. We're just giggling over here because we like the idea of Strainprint so much. They're on our interview list. So yeah, no, we think that it just goes. Everybody likes having from their Fitbit to their calorie counter to on their phone. So it frankly is one of those. Of course, there should be an app to log what's going on with their medical cannabis use, and their Strainprint was. So no, we think that's a fantastic idea.
Well, I'm very glad that you're having them on, and I will say, full disclosure, that I liked them so much that I actually now took a position with them to be their community manager and patient liaison, because they're allowing me to wear my SheCan hat at the same time and still keep that patient focus. So that's a very recent development, and it's actually the first time I've been able to be employed in a decade. So it's kind of been a win-win-win for me as a patient and, as an advocate, and obviously something that I'm really excited about. So yes, it was something that I cared very much about, and has allowed me to continue doing a lot of the advocacy and working with SheCan as well.
Well, congratulations. So just because we could go on and on about all the cool things that I've seen on SheCan, but just some of the interesting things I've seen, everything from discussions on edibles to a chart of the different licensed producers to, what strain does the group like for motivation, to terpenes, to growing your own, to psoriasis. Can you get those are just kind of a few of the things I saw on there, just so the listeners have an idea about, the wide range of topics. Could you give me, I don't know, a top 3 or 4 that have sort of piqued your interest lately that have come up?
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up now, because there's one that's very timely and relevant that kind of comes to mind. We do have a very engaged group. So, we will see 28,000 reactions on social media in a month, which is an extreme amount of activity. So that generates a lot of great conversation. And it really empowers people because they just have that volume of information. But one of the things that came up over the weekend, and it is a massive issue for patients, is accessibility and affordability. And what we were finding is that we had members that I've known, I've been following their journey personally for months and months, and they've had great success with medical cannabis, but now they actually can't afford to purchase their medication. So the cost of the medication not being covered by insurance, and some people don't know, it is already actually taxed. It's the only medication that is taxed in this country with GST and PST, and will be taxed with an excise tax should the proposed changes go through. It is already not affordable for most people, and so that has been a topic of discussion lately, because we do have some advocates who will be speaking in Ottawa to the Finance Committee, and we wanted to be able to give them some more information. And it looks like, based on the early results of this poll this morning, that our members were really happy to engage in, that about 95% of our members are either underdosing or going without their medical cannabis completely, despite the fact that it works for them. So that is, first of all, it's heartbreaking. As much as I knew that affordability was an issue, knowing that so many of these women and men are going without their medication because of something like cost, and they're often turning to pharmaceutical medications, including opioids, because those at least are covered. And that's really, it's a really significant issue, and it extends beyond the education into advocacy and just human rights. So,
absolutely. And the other thing that, it's come up again and again is if one of the points of legalization was to put a dent in the gray and black market of cannabis, affordability and how it's taxed is, a huge policy issue.
Yes, it's a very big issue, and I work with Canadians for Fair Access to Medical Marijuana, or CFAM, a lot on these types of things because it's a natural progression that we have a voice, and that's why I think the SheCan community is so powerful because it can feel bewildering and very upsetting to be in these positions. So we do talk a lot about advocacy. I would say the biggest things that people have questions about, they're not comfortable talking to their doctors often, so we often educate them before they have a prescription. They're not sure. They don't understand cannabis. They have a stigma. We often look at having access for these patients if they're not sure about their own doctor prescribing, helping them connect with a reputable clinic. And, we have clinics we work with nationally. And, we're just a patient-driven organization, so we're always looking for allies. And whether that be licensed producers, whether that be clinics, whether that be pharmacists or medical professionals, we want to give people the best opportunity to discuss cannabis without the stigma and have them, make the best decision for themselves.
Well, like I said, we could go on for hours, but I think wrapping up on stigma is as good a place as any. Ashley, thank you very much for your time. Honestly, I think we'll probably touch base with you for down the road because this has been fascinating, and I'm sure we could do 5 or 6 episodes just on SheCan. But that was great. Thank you. I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you very much, Trevor. And please feel free to reach out anytime you have any questions or comments. I'm always happy to have an open dialogue, and I appreciate so much that, both of you as part of the medical profession are really looking to understand this and address it from so many different angles. So please keep up the good work. We as patients really appreciate it.
So that was Ashley Brown of SheCan. That was a fantastic interview. One of my favorites so far. Kirk, we got more coming up next, though.
We're moving on to Strainprint. They're a Canadian-owned business that's only about 3 or 4 years old, and they are growing and growing and growing. And they are developing tools for us as clinicians. So let's talk to this very enthusiastic Steph.
Let's go to Strainprint.
Reefer MEDness, the podcast.
Hello.
Hello there. It's Kirk here.
Hi there.
Hi. Thank you very much for coming to Reefer MEDness.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi. Okay. Well, my name's Stefaniw, and I am the Chief Creative Officer of Strainprint Technologies.
Cool. And you did this, 2-3 years ago? You came up with an idea for a Strainprint?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll go back a little further. About 4 years ago, when I was in my early 40s, I'm 46 now.
Oh, you gave that away real quick.
I know, right? It was, I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time. I still see her, actually, and she had diagnosed me with PTSD, which I never really considered something that I might have had. I struggled with anxiety and depression for years, most of my life, actually. And I was sort of unsure about how to treat some of the things I was dealing with. It was getting challenging. So she had said to me, you know what? I had read some good stuff about soldiers using cannabis for PTSD. Would that be something you would consider? And I actually was a little taken aback that a doctor would potentially recommend something I knew very little about. I tried it in my 20s recreationally. I hated smoking, so it never stuck. I liked how I felt, but I didn't like the coughing and the stinkiness and all that. So it just never stuck. So when she sort of mentioned it, I was like, I don't know, and I don't want to. Do I have to smoke it? She's like, no, you can do something called vaping, and I'm like, what? Like, that's how naive I was. I knew nothing. So anyway, fast forward a couple weeks, and I said, sure, I'll give it a try. She gave me a referral to see a doctor, Dr. Daniel Schechter, actually. I was one of the first patients, I think, when he opened up his cannabinoid medical clinic back in August of 2014. And that time in Canada, they had just, I think, established the ACMPR. It was the MMPR, and then it went to the ACMPR. He gave me a medical recommendation for, I think it was a gram a day. And I looked at him and I said, perfect. Now, which strains do I buy? And he said, well, I can't really tell you that. You're going to have to trial and error. And I found that to be a little bit surprising. Again, I was really looking for more guidance, hoping for more guidance, but he told me the best he could. And I then was set off on a journey of discovery. And what I did was I bought a few strains from whatever, I can't remember which were the first LP I tried. It might have been Tilray and Tweed, I think. And I bought a bunch of different strains. He'd recommended I try some CBD strains, and I'm like, okay. And I learned two things really quickly. I learned that A, cannabis actually could work for me incredibly well, and B, not all strains worked well for me. So I really had to take notes about it because I didn't want to make the same mistakes. And, if I took too much of one, I felt like not like lethargic or not great. And another one I would take and I would just feel a little bit racy. But then at others, I would be like, no, this is perfect. And suddenly I could, like, a whole world opened up in front of me. So it really changed my life once I started to use it. Am I going on too much? No,
this is wonderful because my research this morning and in the last couple of months since I've discovered your app was that you started journaling.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was saying. So all I could do really to not make the same mistakes and to also learn from past success was to write down what my experiences were. So every time I inhaled cannabis, every single time, like I seem like a crazy person for saying this, but whatever it was, I had different like one or two different vaporizers, and I'd say, okay, 3 puffs at 5:18 p.m., at 190 degrees. Like I was really technical about it. And then I would say within 10 minutes felt calm and whatever. So I started to have my own little shorthand. And after about 6 months of doing this, I went back to the doctor and I showed him, what do you call it when you go back to your check-in?
A follow-up.
A follow-up, exactly. Sorry, I lost the word.
That's all right.
And showed him the journal, and he said, "This is fantastic. This is beyond the scope of what I would expect from a patient." But that said, he was like, "Keep going because
it's working for you.
It's working,"
yeah.
And it sort of made me think. I said to him, like, "Don't all your patients do that?" And he goes, "Well, no, mostly don't. It's not really something you can force people to do." But I thought if there was like an app that could because I wear a Fitbit every day. I don't know, do you have a Fitbit?
I did. I had one for a while.
What it's all about,
yes.
Right? And so I'm a kind of person who I'm like, well, I hate exercising, but if I get this thing and it tells me that I need to walk more, then I might listen to. So the same line of thinking led me to kind of go along the line of maybe there's something to help people to learn how to medicate better. To follow their progress. So
let's jump a couple of years. So you develop this app. You get these business acquaintances who are highfalutin techie guys who are working with you.
So luckily I had a husband who was in software, so he could help me sort of get some developers to help make the project, from an idea into an actual thing. And then we got another business guy who happens to be a data architect of sorts. I mean, he's like sort of like the wizard behind everything, Dave Berg, and Andrew, who is like, he put us all together. He's an old friend of mine from about 12 years ago. And we just started to realize, like, together we could really build this thing and make it happen and help people use cannabis better. That's all we wanted to do.
And you know what I find so interesting about your business is that now Trevor and I have been doing this since October religiously. Last summer we were talking about how we could get into the cannabis industry and what could we do, and it seems exciting, but yet our professions prevented us. So we started doing some research and came up with the idea, well, no one seems to be doing a podcast that has health professionals.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but you know what was really interesting as we did this, sort of like yourself, is like, well, this is out there. We were the first country in the world to legalize medicinal cannabis, but yet the family physicians seem to be not for it. There seem to be a lot of roadblocks and barriers, and what we've discovered in your business is an example of this. This has been patient driven.
Exactly.
The whole industry of medicinal cannabis has been patient driven. So this technology, this app that you've developed, is now patient driven. And let's talk about the app. Tell me, how does this app work now?
So in a nutshell, like you said, it's patience. Okay, so again, you're new to cannabis. You don't know much about it. That seems to be a large chunk of people who are using the app. You know, people like your mom, who's just trying oils for the first time and whatever. And you want to know, a little bit more. If you're replacing traditional meds, you want to have more a feeling like this is medicine. So we're going to treat it like medicine. So first thing you do is you download the app from the App Store or Google Play. It's free. Doesn't cost the patient a dime. Second thing is you're going to fill out just a very, very simple sign-up profile thing where it's going to ask you, and it's very easy to do. It's a simple setup wizard. So it takes you through it. It's going to ask you which conditions you suffer and which symptoms you are looking to use cannabis to treat, because we're not treating the conditions. We're helping to treat the symptoms. And then once you're done that, it asks you which strains you may already currently have, because most people do have like a recommendation or one or two products that they start with. We also have an explore section that people can go on and look up if they are not sure where to start. That can help sort of form opinions. This is just based on, amount of users and uses. So again, it's just a crowdsourced information to find top trending strains for certain symptoms. Okay, so you get the app, you download it. Now you're on. You have you also get something called Strainpoints, which we developed, the loyalty program, because we figure, why not incentivize people? It's not an easy thing to actually take the time to be mindful about medicating. So let's be rewarded for it. Why not? Mm-hmm. So we're going to get some bonus points for that, which I can tell you about later. And then you're good to go and you're ready to track a session. What that means is just after you've medicated, whether you've inhaled it, ingested it, whatever you do, you tap. There's a giant button in the middle of the app. It was designed to be very user-friendly and very simple. So I don't know if you've seen the interface, but it's like... No,
I've downloaded it, and I actually have played with it. And I had And I had an opportunity to go to Colorado and in a legal environment actually test it out. And it's beautiful. It's a fascinating app. I have lots of questions on the nursing side of it, and I'm sure Trevor, as a pharmacist, we both thought it was marvelous, because it's almost
I do want to say one thing. My father was a pharmacist for 50 years. Okay, so I grew up in a drugstore, literally behind the counters, wearing a white lab coat, helping him count pills. And for me, I have an immense respect for obviously pharmacy, for dosing, and how we learn from pharmacists are the gatekeepers, right? Like they're supposed to be the all-knowing. They're the ones that tell you, oh my God, you're taking this. I mean, now we have computers to help circumvent some errors, but I've seen, my dad catch some crazy stuff in the day, interactions with other meds and stuff like that. So for me as a pharmacist's daughter, we have to treat cannabis in the same way. I feel that that's what has been lacking to this point, is that people don't view cannabis in the same way that they do just a general a pill that they're taking, certainly not an opioid or anything like that. So just to get that, so you track a session that right after you medicated, and what it's done is it's set up in a typical sort of a medical pain scale. So it's going to ask you, what symptom are you treating? I'm going to say headache. My head, how bad is your headache? On a scale of 1 to 10. Most people can answer that question. If it's a 10, you're pretty much dying. Right. Most people can evaluate. Oh, can I give this one a 7? Okay, give it a 7. what are you consuming? And you just fill in, I'm taking vaping, Blue Dream or whatever it is, and I had 5 puffs of it. Okay,
Right.
Put it away. And now the app is set to notify you based on the method of ingestion. So if you're inhaling it, you're going to get a notification in 20 minutes. And if you're swallowing it, you're going to get a notification in an hour. So based on when the cannabis starts to metabolize in your body. And it's going to then ask you after 20 minutes, how bad is your headache now? Now you're catching someone in real time as they're experiencing the hopeful benefits of this medicine. Not a 7 anymore, right? No, actually, no. I can really say right now it's a 3. Not in a month from now when I go to my doctor and he says, how did it help for your headaches? Yeah, it helps. To be able to say I was at a 7 and I went to a 3, and also we asked for emotive ratings. Does it make you feel tired? Does it make you feel happy? Does it make you feel creative, focused, whatever? We have a whole list of them. You pick and done. That's all we're doing. So over time, as you track these sessions, your personal snapshot, your profile starts to fill in, and it starts to, give percentages for how much efficacy you got with this versus this versus this. So, you can sort of see how it lays out. The more information you put in, the more you get out of it.
It's a more comprehensive diabetic log, in a sense.
Pretty much.
When you look at a diabetic tracking how they use insulin, how they eat, and how they track their food, their exercise, and their medicine, you've done.
Sure, it would be along those lines.
Yeah, you've done that, and I've played with this, and I've gone deep into it, and I've noticed, and this is something new that I picked up in the last couple of days here, as I was just on the couch playing with your app, that I can actually modify this to my own needs. I met a friend of mine who has an autoimmune disorder, and and I discovered that he is a card-carrying medicinal cannabis user. I didn't know that, and we just got into a conversation. Of course, sharing about the podcast, and I said to him, "Hey, did you know about Strainprint?" He said, "No idea." So I brought it up on my phone. I showed him it, and we went looking for autoimmune, and there it is. And I said, "You can basically program this app to meet your needs."
We have over 350 conditions and symptoms listed. And by the way, if something's missing, we have a great support team here so that people can email and say, how come so-and-so is such and such and all listed, and it will be up within hours.
So from a patient care perspective, an advocate of medicinal cannabis, and the more I learn about cannabis, and if you've listened to episode 5, I made a declaration that I believe that all people that use cannabis recreationally, non-recreationally, medicinally, however you call it, I believe they're self-medicating. And
100%, I believe that.
I believe that. I believe that non-medicine users and recreational. And what I liked about your app is that you do have a recreational option.
Yeah, and if permit me to just say this about that, because I didn't even know this when we added that option in. We added that because we had users write in to say, you know what? Sometimes I just out with friends on a Saturday night, and I just want to use it recreationally. Can I track those sessions too? Of course. Okay, let's give you that option. But what's interesting is that we're finding that some users who've been chronic users of cannabis for years, 20 plus years, they've never been accountable. So there's a lot of people that they smoke a lot of weed. They're realizing if I have something, a tool that I can, like Weight Watchers, where you start tracking how much you're eating, and you start tracking, how much weed am I consuming in a day or whatever, a week, whatever. Suddenly we can start, looking at reducing that amount.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who I've known since the '60s, so I'm outing myself. We've been dear friends.
Youngster.
We've been dear friends for a long time, and he's been self-medicating. We've actually had these conversations, so I'm not going to out him by his name, but he'll know I'm talking about him. We've talked about this, and he's developed a dependency and a psychological disorder to cannabis. Like he is one of the 9%. And I said,
happened. That's the reality.
And he's getting therapy for it now. And I said, there's, nothing in harm reduction says you have to stop smoking cannabis. What harm reduction would suggest you do is you start tracking and being more cognitive of what you're smoking, how you're smoking it, and why you're smoking it. And you should check out this new app.
Well, that's why we printed up shirts that say mindfully medicated. We want to be able to give people, we want them to say, you know what? I'm treating this as if I'm treating medicine because I am self-medicating. So again, let's be accountable to something, someone, something, see how much you're actually consuming. You can reduce. I've had people say they've reduced, so they've gone down from like maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 grams a day, which seems, a lot to me, and they've gone down to maybe half of that, and that's amazing.
Well, I've noticed
other things.
You allowed 12 doses a day, right?
Well, we do, but that's not entirely true.
Well, you track 12.
Doses, you can track as much as you need to track, but we give points for up to 12 because we don't want them to game the system and think that, they can just track and log up all these points, and then because then it's the data that we want.
Right.
And by the way, all the data is anonymized, so you're not attached. We don't know who you are. The data is there. It's put into a giant pool of information that then gets sorted and filtered through our other software, which is Strainprint Analytics.
And I was going to ask you that when you log in. I can't remember. I think I provided my age, my sex, and I think I've provided an email. I don't think you actually asked for my name.
No, so your age. So here's where we would get your name if you redeem for loyalty items. So we give away hundreds and hundreds of vapes and grinders and shirts and hats. And as I was just here, I'm in the office. A big shipment of new bamboo trays came in.
Cool.
For anyone that knows the app, that's something that's been a staple for a while. And once you're ready to redeem for an item, you just put in your name and your address. So it's not tagged to your data, so we don't know what you just know that you've redeemed for that item.
Okay.
So it's privacy is something we take very seriously.
Yeah, I've read all your privacy. You meet all the Canadian. Now you're a Canadian company, right? You're Canadian.
We
owned,
are.
And
we're in Toronto.
Yeah, and you have you're Canadian owned, Canadian shares. So you guys quick statistics. You gained $3 million raised on Series A's private placement.
U.S. funds, yeah.
So those and U.S. funds. So you have U.S. customers. So you do. So you obviously, I guess clients. They're not customers.
Sorry, you know what? We have to. It's confusing. Where there's patients, we have patients that are using the app in the States and in Canada. And then as far as like customers, because what we do is we sell the anonymized data in a subscription form.
Right. I want to get to that. I want to get to that. Let's stay with the app for a moment. You've got tens of thousands of users.
Yes.
You've got 500,000 medical records in there. You've got 7 million data points, and you're increasing 25% information a month.
Isn't that crazy? It's actually
you're the Facebook of cannabis users.
Well, I mean,
in a sense, right? You're gathering all that information.
Here's the thing, and this is, I mean, you just said earlier, you talked to a friend, and have you heard of this app? No, I haven't heard. I want everyone to know of this app. If they're using cannabis, if they're, I'm not talking about the occasional recreational user, but if it's something that you're incorporating into your life, 100% I want you to use this app. I want you to know about it because not only are you going to learn more about what works best for you, but you are going to we are part of a generation now that is able to inform treatment guidelines for generations to come. Like you can be part of this what we call it, the largest observational real-time study on cannabis use.
Yeah, and that's exactly my notes. My notes say that real-time use, how's it different than Leafly, for example? Leafly
is a great app as well. It's not, people can go in and they can write reviews based on their experiences with particular strains. I believe, I haven't actually done it on Leafly. I know that they have, it's also crowdsourced reviews. It's not exactly what we do because there's no app for Leafly to be able to track your sessions or anything like that. But they provide very useful information for people that really don't have another place to go.
Right.
There's nowhere to go. If you're somebody who's curious or you're thinking about it or you want to talk to your doctor about it, just you're feeling a little bit shy or anxious. I mean, these are all things that we're told, right? And I've personally experienced those things too. So we want to have people have a place to go. And in fact, I want to also say that we are weeks away from launching a beta of our it's going to be pretty exciting, but it's going to be something of a community that we will have a place for people to just come and learn and, metaphorically have a nice warm cup of tea and, and talk amongst people who are in the same position.
Steph, I've got so many questions for you. I
we'll have to take it into another podcast.
I think so, but here's a couple real quick about the app here. Just How do you validate the data? I mean, when you look at the data's coming in. There's some flaws to the. I mean,
that's a great question. And we put a lot of thinking into that, obviously, because we need to make sure. So there's two things. One is we have ACM. Our strains are all ACMPR validated strains, which means that you can go online, you can get the lab reports for many of the LPs, provide that are transparent. Some are less, but we are working hard to make sure that all the information on the strains that are in our database is up to date and it has full cannabinoid and terpene profile. So that's the first thing. So you know that when you're tracking against, Pink Kush from Tilray, that we know which batch it is and we know what's in it. That's really important. Second thing is we do have algorithms in place to detect rogue users. So if you're tracking like the same numbers against the same strains or the same results, or we have a whole bunch of algorithms in place to make sure that we clean up.
Yeah, for example, like some of myself playing on the couch, I put myself through a token use. Okay, I'm going to play with this, and so you'll pick up that whoever from this email address.
The system may pick it up if there's something that looks weird about it or off about it. It could get flagged. I can't say for sure in that one case because don't forget we have millions and millions of points of data.
7 million.
I know it's insane.
It is insane. It's amazing.
Said, it's a very valid question. We want to make sure, listen, we had just about a month ago, we had our first medical journal published from the University of Washington. This is really important stuff. So if the medical community can look at our data and say, yes, nothing's perfect, of course, it's not a clinical setting. However, it's something, and it's something that if we're crowdsourcing this information, so we know if thousands of people are having the same type of results, we can look at that and we can say there's something to it, right?
And that leads us right to the next business. I guess you have Strainprint, the app, but then now all that data, you have Strainprint analytics.
Yeah.
So now
we needed to put it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So the data was starting to fill up, and then we've been working on concurrently as the data has been pouring in this dashboarding system to filter and sort this data. And what we've got now is a very, very slick and interesting and amazing piece of software that you can spend hours on it. Sometimes I do. Like at nighttime, I'm like, I can watch Netflix or I can just play with this data.
Look at my numbers. So you have the producer edition and the clinical edition. So the clinician, is that for the clinician? Is that for the family doc?
Yeah. So for clinics, if they want to be able to have the doctors, first of all, the clinic edition. The clinics can have the software sort of part of the medical records, right? So it can be all talking to each other, so that's good. But also for like if a patient comes in with a certain MS or whatever, and they're a 40-something-year-old woman, they can go online or onto our app and then start seeing like areas that, it looks like you should be with maybe an oil like this, like a 1-to-1 would be a good starting place or whatever. We can see what's working really well for
so the data. So as a nurse, if I happen to have this in my clinic, as a nurse, I get a 40-year-old MS patient coming in.
Yeah.
I can go to the data and say, let's see what other people within your demographic are using as a strain and terpenes. And
even geography, by the way. So if you're living, it's interesting, like we can see the differences between what's happening in Manitoba or Alberta or BC versus Ontario. Like it's very interesting, the patterns and who's using what. We can slice it. You can slice it and dice it however you want. Essentially, it's the same data. It's just presented in a different way.
It's a very interesting way, and in the way of when we're researching cannabis in the industry and how patient-driven technologies are basically driving this industry, but it's also driving the care of patients. And it's, we just talked to, and I guess we learned yesterday that there's a merger, not a merger, but there's a link between you and SheCan. And we
had very excited about that.
Yeah.
Not a merger whatsoever, but
no. I mean, just you've hired somebody on. We just interviewed Ashley.
Ashley Brown.
Yes.
My goodness, do I love that woman.
Yeah, no, we interviewed her
amazing.
yesterday, and she's actually going to be part of this podcast episode, and we didn't know this, right?
Fantastic.
So that's, but there's another example with advocacy, and so. I don't know if I want to ask you a political question. How are you working with the family physicians group, the Association of Family Physicians, the College of Family Physicians? Their position statement is that they're not recommending that family physicians prescribe cannabis.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think patients are going to start advocating for themselves, and they're going to find a way to get it, because ultimately, there's a lot of antiquated thinking that's going on there. I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I'm not putting you on the spot, but
no.
But I think your app is the result of that. A client, an educated client, can walk into a doctor's office and say, you know what, here's some data for you. Here's how it's working for me. Can you add it to my care?
Well, this is yes, 100% right. Like we want to be able to have more and more studies come out with the data to be able to help validate this for a lot of physicians who are doubtful, or sometimes it just takes, this doctor may not do it, but I'm going to go to see a different doctor that is open to it. Like sometimes if you're going to have like an older doctor that's pretty set in his or her way, then you move on if need be. Mm-hmm. If cannabis is something you're determined to try, then patients will find a way to do it. And that's becoming more and more important as as I'm watching this unfold, is just patient advocacy is really the future of their, gone are the days where, you walk into the doctor and you just take two of these in the morning and 2 of these at night, and I'll see you in a month. I mean, now people are pretty savvy to other options, what with the internet and everything, it's a bit of a different time now. So we have to realize that, and it's nothing about the recommendations from the colleges, but we have to be more open-minded. If it's working for hundreds and millions of patients or whatever, then obviously why shut down the access to that? That seems very, very old school thinking and is not gonna live that much longer, in my opinion. Yeah, I think this is all going to go away over the coming years, the next few years. So
how do you think legalization of cannabis non-medicinal use is going to affect your business?
I really don't know. I mean, we've been pretty kind of nimble throughout, and we're sort of watching on the sidelines just like everybody else. The good thing is that hopefully it will help. I hate using the word, but it's the only word I can use, the stigma. I think it'll become more normalized. So I think just like there's liquor stores or whatever, there's cannabis stores. Okay. So people will start seeing it as part of their regular life, which is, I think, useful. It's not something you got to go into like the back alley to like buy drugs from a dealer. So I think that will help. I think that also, and this was the part that concerns me a little bit, is that there are a lot of opportunities for people to misuse it because nobody knows really about it. We're just learning, so that's why I feel that now more than ever, we need to keep this groundswell going. We need to get tons and tons and tons more, exposure and users on the system, learning about it. And then we can spit out the information back to the public, back to the media, back to the doctors, whoever it takes, to start realizing that, hey, people are using this, and guess what? They're getting off of opiates. Yeah. They're not using other medications. We got to watch. We got to listen.
We in episode 3 we interviewed a lawyer, and he visioned the whole craft beer industry and the craft bud tender industry. When I had the opportunity to go to Colorado and walk into a dispensary and see the medicinal side and the recreational side, it was like walking into a craft brewing or a Scotch whiskey tasting where you can.
Did you go into those dispensaries in Denver? Have you been to
No, I went to Fort Collins and went went to organic alternatives.
Okay.
A nice little place, local business, local grow up, local, everything's local. These guys treated me really well. I sat in the middle of this old tobacconist place, wood everywhere, glass, in this mayhem, watching from 21 years old to, I swear, one lady was in her 80s. People coming in with military fatigues, people like all walks of life, walking in, talking to their bud tender, picking their high. And I was thinking about your app at the time because I downloaded and brought it with me. And I was thinking, boy, you could almost be like a beer tasting app. You could almost go on the recreational side. Okay, I've got the terpenes. You could actually follow and dial in your high, as I called it.
You see how it can go in so many.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty. We actually have a lot of things that we're going to be adding to it in the coming months as well, to further enhance the experience and to make it even more accurate. Like things like adding a menstrual calendar for women, so that we can gauge it against your cycle.
What a great idea!
There obviously must be correlations between the hormones in women. Okay, let's track that. Let's learn things like weather. I mean, people that suffer from migraines, how is that affecting how the efficacy of the cannabis? So there's so many areas that we can dial in.
You have a really exciting business. Like when I was reading through your business, and you've just raised $3 million, and I noticed that you're looking at one of the interviews I was reading. You're looking to use that money to hire and look at expanding into Australia. You're looking at expanding into other countries.
Yeah, I mean the money is exactly that's it. Yeah. It's so that we can hire great people, and I cannot underscore that word enough.
Well, I noticed that there's no pharmacists or nurses on your staff, so.
We'll take this offline.
You can look us up in LinkedIn. We're more than just groovy voices.
Oh, that's awesome! I love it. You're hired.
Yeah.
We don't. We have actually four amazing medical advisors. We just announced 3 new ones, so we're just so thrilled just to bring it back full circle. Dr. Schechter recently accepted a position as one of our medical advisors, which I couldn't be happier about, quite frankly, as well as Dr. Carolyn McCallum, who's a very respected physician out in Vancouver, and a pharmacist as well, I will add, out in BC, and Dr. Dean Elterman as well. So we got some very,
really
very
cool
big
people.
brains on this.
That's great.
And those people are there to guide and advise us on all things medical. I think Dr. Schechter is going to be off to Australia next week, so he will share his learnings with us, right?
Yeah.
Again,
that's great.
It's about hiring and getting the right people, the good people. My goodness, there's so many good people that just need a chance. And just moving forward, who knows what the future holds? We're just trying our best right now to provide. We're learning. We're trying to share the learning as much as we can, and hopefully this conversation will seem very, silly, actually, in a decade from now.
Yeah.
Not silly, but you know what I mean?
Well, our ignorance. There's a friend of mine used to tell me, ignorance is curable, stupid's forever. And I think, I think people misunderstand the word ignorance. Ignorance means that you don't understand something. It means that you're teachable, you can learn about it. And I think there's been a lot of...
And we've been cannabis ignorant for pretty much 80 years or however long prohibition's been for.
When I look at your app, you're really focused on cannabis, which is fantastic. But one of the things we've discovered in our research is that people that have discovered cannabis start getting off of some of their other meds, like they might be they lower. So I'm wondering, are you looking at that? Are you looking to add?
So yes, the answer is yes. We do. We have something that we're working on right now to try and guide and track for opiates as well. Okay. Specifically opiates, that type of medication that has become an epidemic. I don't know if you watched the CNN documentary recently that. I think it's called Weed 4. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, or if anyone... Well,
all the research, there's so much medical research out there right now about...
this is really a problem. The opioids are causing more deaths, I believe, in the United States than car accidents, breast cancer, and guns, which mind-blowing, right? So, okay, so we're working on some ways to be able to work that into the app, but also we're going to be working on some studies specifically with doctors who are going to be following patients and doing the best way we can do studies. I mean, clinical trials for cannabis, of course, as you must know, this is millions of dollars and years in the making, and we're trying to the time is running out.
Right.
We're trying to figure shit out, and people are dying, and let's see if we can help those people not die.
Well, and that's the thing. This is a good way to sort of end the conversation. We all agree we need more study, but we can't delay. Cannabis is, as someone said, the horses have left the barn, right?
They sure have. They're running right now rampant.
Yeah.
They're just running in the fields wild, and we need to sort of we need to say, hey, come this way. This is the right way. This is the good way. The other way is not so good. Maybe.
Let's study it and let's go this way and let's get rid of some of the barriers and let's learn as we go. No, I'm an advocate of medicinal cannabis. I've seen it work. I've seen the perils of people that have abused cannabis, but I've also seen it work. So I'm all over this.
Nothing makes me happier, by the way.
Yeah.
Nothing makes me happier than when I get an email, a personal email from somebody who's used the app that has suffered for years, that has tried everything, and they stumble upon cannabis however they stumble upon it, and they stumble upon the app however they did, and they suddenly have their lives dramatically have improved to the point where they're playing with their kids again, and they're smiling, and oh my God, I could just cry. And I do. I do get to read, and that's the best part of my job. And when I get to read those success stories.
I'm loving your enthusiasm. We're hoping.
It has to. Listen, it's a 7-day. I say 18 hours a day, 7-day a week job.
Yeah, but you sound like you really enjoy it, and that's a blessing.
You're right. It is.
That's
You're
a blessing.
Thank you for taking all this time to speak. Actually, really.
Well, I'm just loving this because we've given our producer the job of making the last 2 interviews into an hour show, and I think you've just challenged him.
I'm sorry. You know what? It might have to be a 2-part series. I don't know.
You know what? That's not a bad idea. We're changing as we go. Thank you very much, because you guys approached us, and this has been a fabulous discussion, and I wish you all the luck. And we will touch base with you again, and I am going to follow your app and see the changes.
Start tracking. I'd love to send you some stuff.
Yeah, I will.
All
Cheers.
right, take it easy. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
It's Reefer MEDness, the podcast.
So, what'd you think of that interview? Strainprint.
The Strainprint was fantastic. Steph from Strainprint is, you can't get someone more enthusiastic about what they do, and frankly doing some fascinating stuff.
Yeah, as a pharmacist, what do you think about that?
That's what we want. We want data. We want to be able to say, if, like you said, if you're a 46-year-old MS patient, what have other 46-year-old MS patients from the Dauphin area used? And she's collecting the data to find out.
Mm-hmm. I never got a chance to really discuss some of the issues with the data, because there are statisticians who will tell you there's flaws. I mean, there's flaws with the average. This
isn't our double-blind placebo-controlled trial. But
I love when you said it. Say that again.
No, I got that right the first time. But the part I was amazed with is how closely they're working with the licensed producers.
Yep.
That it's not just what Trevor thinks is purple kush. It's, what purple kush is coming from Aurora, and, the breakdown of the cannabinoids and terpenes.
Exactly.
So, it's not... the data could always be better, but it's not just out there in left field.
It's organized. It's organized data. And people are recognizing it. I did read the study, and that was the study. How does marijuana strains and dosing affect depression and anxiety? It's a new study that looks for answers, and that was in Forbes magazine, and it's Washington State University. So academics have picked up on this app.
Yeah, no, and that's what she's saying. It is getting published, and they're collecting literal millions of data points. So I'm hoping to see lots of studies in the future. And like she said, maybe this could lead to, what you and I are used to dealing with, which are clinical practice guidelines. You've got patient X who's got condition Y. What might work for them?
But we also want to remember the art of medicine too.
We won't forget the art, but I love the data. The data is great.
The science versus the art. So let's talk a little bit about a local sponsor. We did the Pop Fizz here.
Yeah, pass the pop.
Pass the pop.
Pass the pop.
Pass the pop.
Sorry, pass the pop.
I was walking to work today to the studio, and I got some notes from the fella. It currently has 300 types of beverages, growing to 1,200 by the end of the spring. This is a gourmet pop shop.
What is, but now, not that we should downplay the gourmet because we like that part, but I've got to throw in a plug for my son, Eric. Pass the Pop is easily his favorite store in town because
ice cream, corn dogs,
and all these candies that, for me anyway, I hadn't seen since I was like 12. So the fact my 12-year-old is loving some of the things, that I hadn't seen when I was 12, it was fantastic.
Retro candy. They've got a wide variety of ginger beer. Now, I'm not a pop advocate, but I do like my ginger beer.
The ginger beer yesterday was excellent.
And I like tonic water in my gin.
I don't like tonic water, and I don't love gin, but I'll outer. My wife likes both.
But Pass the Pop can be found on Facebook.com. Pass the Pop. They're at Pass the Pop 204 on Twitter. They also have an internet business. They're Prairie Mountain Specialties, and they can be found. There are 20 retailers that are in their network. So you can order online through Facebook, and you can order online through www.pmspecialties.ca. So thank you very much. They're the sponsor of episode 6, Pass the Pop. Now, we're going to lead into... Melisa Stefaniw, I have a copy of an unpublished CD that even the artist is asking me.
She doesn't even know she has it.
She doesn't even know she has it. No, it got passed to me from a dear friend of hers. He passed it to me. And Melisa Stefaniw called me and said, Kirk, I need a copy of my CD, please. Because she's given all her CDs away. Now, what happened is I went for a ride and I was listening to the music. And the song that I picked to end this episode with is called Gentleman's Disgrace. Melisa was telling me that she won an Alberta Foundation for the Arts. She won a $15,000 award.
Congratulations.
So Melisa Stefaniw is known in the community as an artist. She's played on the stage many a times. And those in Dauphin know her and love her. And please stick around. This is 6 minutes, and the song builds and it builds and it builds. Don't just stop. Listen to the end.
I think we just finished off episode 6.
Episode 6, Reefer MEDness, the podcast.
Make sure you come back and look for us on those social medias.
On those, what is it? Facebook, the
Twitter,
the Twitter there,
the Instagram, I think we're at Reefer MEDness.
Like a bunch of hicks. We're not really hicks.
Well, a little bit hickish. I think we're at Reefer MEDness on all of those. And then what's our website? Our website.
People need to go to our website. Our website is informative. Our website is educational. Don't just go there to look at our pretty faces masked by microphones. ReeferMed.ca.
ReeferMed.ca. Go there, learn along with us.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Well, time to blow this joint. Like the show? Let us know. We're Reefer MEDness on Instagram and Facebook, at Reefer MEDness on Twitter, or head over to the website at reefermed.ca to find out what we're all about and what's coming up next.
For 20 days in July, I didn't leave your house except after midnight. It wasn't honest or polite, but I was never